Good Erev Shabbos, everyone. Looking forward to seeing you in person at the Bayit. For all who are able to be there for a wonderful summer Shabbat, and for all who are not, just sending good wishes out to a Shabbat Shalom to all. This Shabbat, as we read Matot-Masei, marking the journeys of the Jewish people, we also conclude Sefer B'Midbar, Chazak V'nitchazek, wishing for and collaborating for strength. And it is Shabbat Mevarchim Chodesh Av, the Shabbat in which we pray for a month of blessing and health as we enter Chodesh Av. Of course, it's complicated because of the teaching Mishenichnas Av Mematim B'Simcha. When Av enters, we reduce our joy. And I was reflecting on, while the traditional teaching is that the name months that we traditionally use now for the Hebrew months, although biblically they are named by number, starting with the month of Nisan, which is called the first month in the Torah. But nowadays we refer to the months by the names that Olei Bavel, that those who came out of the exile of Babylonia brought with them. Even returning to our homeland, we carried a memory of our exile, and we continue in certain ways to mark our calendar by our experiences in exile. And so the name months have their Babylonian names, and Av may refer to any of a variety of Akkadian or other Babylonian words. But of course, in Jewish tradition, different than almost every other month name, this word is also a Hebrew word, Av. It means father. It reflects on our connection to a parent. And it's striking to then, with that in mind, knowing that we're welcoming the month of Av in all its complexity, with its hardship, with Tisha B'Av coming in the 9 days ahead leading up to it. And then on the other side, looking ahead to Tu B'Av, to a moment of love and joy and relief. It's interesting to see the way the word Av, meaning father, plays out in this week's Haftarah. Of course, a Haftarah intentionally chosen to be the second of the three Haftarot of challenge, of punishment, of retribution that we read in this season in which we commemorate so many historical calamities that befell the Jewish people. And at the very, very beginning of the Haftarah, Jeremiah challenges the people in Jeremiah chapter 2, speaking in God's voice. Ma matzu avotechem bi avel. What wrongdoing did your ancestors find in me that they went after false gods and abandoned me? So the beginning of the Av journey in the Haftarah is actually about looking back at our history, what we do in this season, looking back at the challenges in our history, that which befell us, and the difficult choices that we made across Jewish history. And we look at it through reflecting on our avot, on our ancestors and the choices they made, and what we could learn from them to be different today. It's echoed in many ways in the very end of the Torah, when we say, Zechor yemot olam binu shnoto vador sha'al avicha v'yagedcha. If you want to understand history, you have to ask your parent. You have to look back at where you came from and the choices that were made that bring us to this day. So the first reference to the Av is Ma matzu avotechem bi avel. Look at your human parents and understand the choices that they made and how they shape us. Then later on in the Haftarah, Yirmiyahu critiques the Jewish people and says the following. Let me find it. Omrim la'etz avi ata. The idolatry of the Jewish people was such that they turned to things made of nature, turned to wood, even to things that were shaped by their own hands, and said, "You are my father." This is the absurdity of idolatry, the idea of attributing power to things which are under our own hands, and attributing to them so much power that we see them as our parentage. And so these are moments and times of reflection. The next thing we ask ourselves when we reflect on Av, on parent, is what do we give power to? What do we attribute authority over us that shouldn't? Where are we mistakenly turning to authority and leadership over us, which is not right? And what is the appropriate authority and leadership for us that we should turn to? And of course, finally, it's striking that while the bulk of the Haftarah is one contiguous section of Jeremiah chapter 2, we add on one verse alone. We skip then to chapter 3, verse 4 and end. Halo me'ata, was it now finally? Karata li avi, aluf nu'urai ata, that you called to me and said, Avi, my father, you are the companion of my youth. You have been with me since my childhood. This is the vision of hope that the Haftarah ends with, that we turn back to God. And we say, going all the way back to our avot, to our ancestors, to when we were a young nation, we rightfully turned to God and said, Avi, you are my God. So Mishenichnas Av, when God's presence, which historically in the moments that we're commemorating was a presence that led to pain and suffering, a punishing presence, when Av, that aspect of Av, enters, our sadness increases and our joy diminishes. But if we take the lessons of each reference of Av in the Haftarah, looking back at the choices our ancestors made and learning from them, making the right choice about what to call an Av, not wood, not metal, not idols, but turning back to God and saying from the very beginning, Avi, you are my parent, in whom I place hope, with whom I build a relationship, then we're setting ourselves on the right path. Please God, please Heavenly Parent, for a season when we can recall the hardships and the sufferings, knowing that we're on the journey to a better place, and prepare ourselves for the journey to Avinu Malkeinu, our parent, our sovereign, in the high holiday season just a couple months away. Love and Shabbat Shalom.